Morning, everyone. It's Thursday. It's Maundy Thursday. We're in the business end of Holy Week now, heading towards tomorrow, the death of Jesus, and then remembering that through the weekend to Easter Sunday. Today is centered around our story. Is centered around the story of the Last Supper and the betrayal and all the events of the night that lead through to the crucifixion of Jesus on Friday morning. And I put up an image before we began of the Last Supper, which is one of the two stories that frames this evening, the beginning of this evening's events, very powerfully. Of course, it's a socially distant Last Supper. If you don't know what was going on, you can go back and have a look. But you have Jesus sitting by himself at the table with some hand sanitizer and doing a kind of video conferencing with the disciples. It tickled me, and I've seen it on Facebook and other places quite a few times. And I wanted to use that image because I think it speaks to one of the great themes of Maundy Thursday. In the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, we have Matthew, Mark and Luke telling essentially the same story about the beginning of the journey into the night for Jesus and his disciples. And that story is the story of the Last Supper. It's almost identical in them. Jesus, at the end of a traditional Passover meal, in all kinds of symbolic ways, he takes the bread and the cup that are symbols of the sacrifice of the blood spilt by the sacrificial lamb, and the covenant made through the smearing of the blood on the doorpost. He turns that around and says that this covenant is now resting in me and my life and my blood, essentially, is what he's saying. And it's not a massively intimate image that we have in the Last Supper stories in the Gospels. They're very short, in certainly in one case. What we do have is Jesus giving a symbolic act, which in all of the Christian church we would regard as a sacrament, so a particular kind of ordinance or thing that God has told us we should do, or invited us to do, is probably a better way of saying it, to help us root ourselves in who we are and what we're about. And if we're not careful, the Last Supper becomes for us just a kind of symbolic version of the equation that we have in the church, where Jesus pays the price for our sins, and that price is paid, and therefore a new covenant is made available, and God's life is open to us in a new way, and there we are. That is the good news. The other story in John's Gospel doesn't have the Last Supper in it at all. It doesn't have the breaking of the bread. It does have the supper, but there isn't the breaking of the bread and the sharing of the wine in the same way. But there is uniquely the washing of feet. Jesus does a deeply uncomfortable thing for his disciples. He does what the servant should do. He gets up from the table and puts a robe around him, so a towel around his waist, and takes a bowl and washes the disciples' feet. An act of deep servanthood. Peter struggles with this, says, "You're not washing my feet. You're not supposed to do that." And Jesus says to him, "Unless I wash your feet, you have no place in what comes next," essentially. I have to do this to you in order for you to really understand what it is that is God's gift to you. And so Peter says, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well. A wonderfully open response. So today, I want to think about intimacy, because for many of us, one of the things that might be most intimidating for us about going to church on a Maundy Thursday, maybe any day, but particularly Maundy Thursday, is that there might just be some washing of feet, and we might have to take off our shoes and socks, or be invited to. No one gets, dragged into a line and has their shoes and socks forcibly removed. But I find myself uncomfortable in a foot washing ceremony. We don't do it every year, we don't do it in every place, but it is something we do every now and then as part of reenacting that for ourselves and feeling the discomfort of it, because it is so personal and so intimate. And I have to be honest, I have ugly feet, or at least I have ugly toes. I won't bore you with the details, but kind of a lifetime of sport and running and other things has left my toes, especially my big toes, and just not my best feature. And our feet are very personal. even though they are such intensely practical things. So we hide them from each other almost all the time in socks and shoes. And there is a great intimacy, not just in being barefoot together, but in then washing each other's feet. Now, I get the discomfort, and I understand it. And the point isn't today whether you should take part in a foot washing ceremony or not, but to talk about intimacy. Because in this time when we are socially distanced from each other in all kinds of ways, intimacy is a good theme for us to think about on a day like today. What does it mean for God to come close to us in the whole of the story of the life of Jesus, and to remain close to us in the aftermath of that? And how is that brought home to us in the story of Jesus washing feet? And the great questions it asks about how we are connected to each other beyond the hellos and the how are yous, beyond the sort of social niceties of the way we have conversations so often. The Methodist Church produced some time ago, and has produced a sequel to that recently, a report called Time to Talk of God, which had at its premise the question, why are we so good in the Methodist Church at being hospitable? Why are we so good at being welcoming and doing the things we do well, but why are we so poor at the deep conversations, at intimacy, really, beyond doing things together, and beyond being nice and kind and good, all of those important things? Why are we so poor at stepping into the intimate space where we really unpack our lives and live with our vulnerabilities together? Not all the time, not with everyone, but as an important part of the culture and tradition and expression of church and community in who we are. Loneliness is a disease across the world, especially in the developed world. It remains true that people are more connected than ever, and isn't this wonderful that you get to sit and listen to my voice, but you can do so in your pajamas. But isn't it wonderful to be able to be so connected when we are not able to be in the same room or even see each other at the same time as feeling so incredibly distant? And I noticed with great concern over the course of 11 years of working as a university chaplain how the rise of social media created more connectedness and more isolation at the same time for so many students. Not for everyone, but for many students. They felt deeply connected to everything, but they didn't feel that they belonged or were known anywhere in any deep and meaningful way. Now maybe when you're a student, your life is in transition, you're stepping into a mostly 3-year cycle of journeying through the stages of it, okay. But I find the same thing in wider society. And it remains true that in dealing with mental health and many other difficulties in our modern society, loneliness, not being known, I suppose, not being in any way in a place where there is some intimacy, whatever form that takes, that is a wound that many people just live with, and a longing and a hope and a desire that they often feel impotent to do anything about. So here we have the story of Jesus coming close, and it gets uncomfortable, but it's very real, and it's very personal, and it's very powerful. I'm sure for some of the disciples, they were just glad that it was over when it was over, a bit like when we wash feet in church. But the challenge of the act, because Jesus doesn't just say, now I've washed your feet, you know where you are with God. Jesus says, now you go out and do this. And I don't think he's saying, take up a bowl and knock on people's doors and say, can I wash your feet? Because that would be a bit creepy and weird for any of us to do at any point. But he essentially says to them, now that you have felt the discomfort of intimacy when it's offered to you, go and find ways of creating the possibility of that discomfort in other people. And I hope you understand what I'm saying, in a good way. Bring intimacy into the world. Bring touch into the world. Bring closeness into the world. Bring servanthood into the world in a way that isn't about doing a job for somebody who can't do it, or helping out, but about saying, in this moment, I am going to offer to be close to you in some way. And you get to decide whether you want to take me up on that or not. I don't have lots of friends because I'm an introvert. I don't need lots of friends, but I have a few very good friends. Some of them that I could see today if I wanted to and I was allowed to. Others that I may never see in my life again because they live halfway around the world. But they remain part of my sense of belonging, my connectedness. I feel known by those people. I feel myself because of their place in my life. I know that if I had to pick up the phone and phone any of them in the middle of the night, that they would all answer the phone and they would all take the towel and bring out the bowl and offer themselves to me in whatever way they felt I needed. I hope there are those people in your life. I hope there are. I hope for all of us today is a day in which we feel that we belong, that we feel known. Maybe those are the same things. Belonging isn't about membership or, about agreeing to something. In the church, we have membership, but it's just the very surface of all that it means for us to not just commit ourselves to a place where we are traveling together deeply and meaningfully, but fundamentally it is an expression of our desire to be known. Now, you don't have to take up membership in the church to express that or to know that. But why do we gather? We don't gather to tick off a list of tasks. We don't gather to be do-gooders. We do those things because out of our desire to serve, with some ego attached to that often, we want to make a difference. But we gather to be known and to know each other and to learn together how to be uncomfortable together, how to be intimate with each other, how to get beyond the niceties and talk about life as it really is, to strip back the veneers that we are so good at creating in ourselves that present a front to the world, and risking the opportunity of intimacy, the possibility of intimacy. So maybe Easter is about, as I've said before, chicks and eggs and chocolate and daffodils. That's fine. That's fine. These videos and the church's life are not there to compel you to feel bad about yourself in any way, because that's what Easter means. And the story of the life of Jesus is something to do with as each of you chooses to do. But for those of us who believe at least that in the life of Jesus there is a moral example to follow, a philosophical example to follow, a practical set of priorities to put into our lives that are about the way we deal with ourselves and each other, and the way we take part in our politics, and the way we use our money, and the way we build community, and the way we forgive and love and fall and get up and do all the things that are all part of us growing up together in every good way. This story is there. It's there. Jesus takes the bowl, ties the towel, washes his disciples' feet, asks them to stay in their discomfort and to allow this to happen because it's good for them, and they will then understand something of the great task that is theirs when he's gone. Not to tell people what the equation is and how they can solve it to get to heaven, but how they can enter into this intimacy that God has always wanted them to explore and experience in themselves and each other and with God, and for that to be something that helps them to feel known and that they belong and that they have a common task because of that shared belonging, to do and to be and to show love in every way that they can throughout the world, in every little and large way that they can. So I hope for some discomfort for you this Easter. It's not likely because we can't really see each other. I've already had one or two people say to me on the phone, do you think we'll all hug each other when we get back to church? We don't normally do that. How are we going to negotiate the kind of physical being in the same space again? And who knows? There'll be no, and now it's hugging time the first time we gather again. There never is. but there will be in the intimacy of our hands and our eyes and our voices and our bodies and the rituals that we do together and the way we talk about this season as it comes to an end, and then we move back into something that begins to be called normal. Choice to make about what we do that is intimate, and that is risk, and that is gift to somebody and to ourselves. I'll see you tomorrow. Loving God, help us to be uncomfortable because we come close. And because people come close to us, and we must make decisions and choices that are good for us, good for them, but not easy to make. Break down our fences and our walls. Help us to put our personas aside. And if nothing else, out of this coronavirus time, help us to live risking more intimacy into the days ahead, however many days each of us gets to have in this life. And thank you for your foot washing example in the person of Jesus. Amen.